A woman's lungs pulling at the mountain air as if each inhale must be wrestled from the night. The frame widens, snowfields under a black sky, ridges serrated like broken glass, and in the hollow of a drift, a figure half buried. Fingers claw against ice. Her mouth opens to a whisper, a name. The voice is hoarse, swallowed instantly by wind. Cut. Silence. Now the screen blooms with color, Cedar Valley at dawn. Smoke rises in straight columns from chimneys. The sound of an axe splitting wood cuts against the morning hush. Cows low, a dog barks once. On the road, men move like metronomes, steady and economical, carrying sacks of grain to the storehouse. It is a town rehearsing survival, each movement performed with the precision of necessity. In the square, Elder Nathaniel Carrington walks with boots that thump like a gavel. His coat is black wool, collar turned up against the wind. He doesn't speak, he measures. Eyes flick across irrigation ditches, fences, the blacksmith's yard. To the community, he is both shepherd and judge. His word weighs more than the snow that roofs every home. From a window across the square, Sarah Peton watches him. She is 23, her hair bound tight, her hands restless on the sill. In one hand, she holds a scrap of paper already worn soft at the corners. A line of handwriting snakes across it, her own, quick and precise. She folds it away when she hears footsteps behind her. Bread won't knead itself, Margaret Carrington murmurs, setting down a basket of flour. The elder's first wife carries herself with the weary dignity of someone who has lived inside both devotion and disappointment. She notices Sarah's folded paper, but does not comment. The silence between them is an unspoken pact. Each woman has her secrets, and neither is ready to break the other's. Outside, children's laughter cracks the cold air. The wives emerge from their homes in small sequences. Rebecca Dalton with her skirts dusted in flour. Catherine Fletcher, barely 19, cheeks red as berries. Elizabeth Crawford, older, already bent at the shoulders by childbirth and worry. They move with a rhythm that looks like ordinary domestic life, yet each glance carries weight. Eyes meet and flick away quickly, as though even acknowledgement might be dangerous. The camera lingers on details, a hand brushing dust from a ledger, a scarf tugged too tight, a glance at the horizon where a rider disappears down the canyon road. Something invisible tenses the air. At the granary, Samuel Brennan squats to study the dirt. Fresh hoofprints overlap in directions that make no sense. His jaw works against itself, grinding, and he straightens slowly, eyes scanning the ridge. A rider, perhaps, or two. The marks tell him someone has been here at night, and not for grain. He wipes his hands on his coat and looks toward Carrington's house. Later that evening, in a root cellar lit by a single tallow candle, 6 men gather around a table sticky with sap. Carrington presides, face half-shadowed. He lays out evidence like a butcher with meat. A ledger with missing pages, a California coin found in a weapons crate, questions asked by a passing trader that were too sharp, too deliberate. They know, he says simply. His voice is quiet, but the stillness it creates is heavier than thunder. The men murmur. Bishop Whitman crosses himself. Daniel Crawford asks, "From where? Who among us?" The candle sputters. Carrington's gaze does not lift. From within. Who else would know the locks, the guard's hour, the depth of the granaries? Silence folds the room. Each man understands what has been spoken without words. Suspicion points not at soldiers, not at strangers, but at the women inside their very homes. Cut back to the wives. Sarah sits at a small table, quill scratching against paper. She pauses, listening. Outside, boots tread past the window. She dips the quill again, ink shining wet in the lamplight. The page reveals not gossip or prayer but numbers, routes, times, information disguised as domestic accounting. She hesitates, then folds the sheet and slides it beneath a loose floorboard. Her breath is steady, but her eyes betray her. The camera rises, pulling us out of the cabin, above the rooftops, until the whole valley lies spread beneath the winter sky. Smoke pillars mark each house, like silent sentinels. In the distance, the ridgeline cuts against the pale sun, sharp as a blade. And over it all, the faintest sound, a bell tolling once, twice. Not loud, not ceremonial, just enough to say, the hour has begun. The sound of the bell lingers in Sarah's ears long after it stops. Not church, not warning, just a sound that says someone is watching the hours. She closes her notebook and tucks it deeper under the floorboard. At supper, the table feels crowded despite the silence. Elder Carrington eats without lifting his eyes, hands moving like machinery, knife, bread, chew, swallow. Margaret pours stew with steady grace, her sleeves rolled up, steam softening the lines of her face. Sarah sits across, eyes lowered. Every clatter of a spoon feels amplified. No one mentions the council meeting, but its shadow sits at the table with them. Tomorrow you'll tend the granary, Carrington says finally, without looking up. Inventory must be checked. Sarah nods, but her chest tightens. The granary, where the hoofprints were, where whispers now cluster like frost on glass. Outside, snow begins to fall again, fine and relentless. The wives gather at the well the next morning, scarves drawn close. Their conversation is small, careful. Children's fevers, the cost of salt, the stubbornness of hens. Yet beneath every word runs a second current, unspoken but sharp. Rebecca Dalton glances around before leaning closer. Samuel's been walking the fields at night. He thinks someone's measuring them. Her voice is barely above the wind. Elizabeth Crawford presses her hands together as if in prayer. Then it won't be long before she cuts herself short, eyes darting toward a passing boy. Mary Lou Kensington lowers her bucket into the well, rope squeaking. Coin from California. In Joshua's storeroom. He says it could only come through trade. Her voice is skeptical, as though daring the others to believe trade is the only explanation. The bucket splashes below. Ripples move outward, faint rings widening and fading. The camera holds on the water a moment too long, as if it too is listening. That night, Carrington paces the length of his study. Margaret watches from the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't sleep," she says quietly. He stops. "There's rot in the valley." His voice is low, meant more for himself than for her. "Or fear," she answers. "Fear can rot faster than truth." He turns, eyes sharp. "You think me wrong? I think you frightened." The words hang heavy. Margaret doesn't move. She has lived long enough with his power to know when to press and when to yield. Tonight she does neither, just names what she sees and leaves him standing in the silence of his own conviction. Meanwhile, Sarah lights a candle in her small room. She spreads the copied notes across the bed, sketches of storage caverns, guard rotations, wagon schedules. Her handwriting is steady, the product of practice, but her hands tremble at the edges. A knock at the door startles her. Catherine slips inside, cheeks flushed from the cold. She is young, too young, and her fear is unpolished, raw. "They're watching us," Catherine blurts. "I saw Wallace at my window last night. He just stood there. Not a word, not a step. Just watching." Sarah takes her hand. "Then we move carefully." Catherine shakes her head. Careful won't be enough. The candle flickers between them, throwing their faces into alternating light and shadow. Two women bound by an invisible rope they cannot cut. The following Sunday, the congregation gathers in the small meeting hall, benches creaking under the weight of wool coats and winter-worn bodies. Elder Carrington speaks of loyalty, of the valley as a fortress of faith. His words echo against the wooden walls, too loud for comfort, too sharp to be simply scripture. Sarah watches the faces around her, Rebecca's jaw tight, Elizabeth's eyes closed in prayer, Miriam Wallace staring at her lap. Every wife in the hall hears the sermon for what it is, not comfort, but warning. A fortress is only as secure as its gate. The camera cuts to Miriam's hands folded in her lap. One finger taps against the other, a tiny rhythm, almost unconscious. Signal or nerves? The audience is left to wonder. As the meeting ends, snow flurries sweep in through the open door. Families file out into the cold, their voices hushed. Sarah lingers at the back, slipping a folded scrap into Rebecca's palm with practiced subtlety. The gesture is quick, unseen. Outside, the valley looks ordinary. Children chasing each other, men saddling horses, dogs barking. But in the women's eyes, fleeting, furtive glances exchanged like contraband, the truth is plain. They are being measured, weighed, and prepared for something none of them can yet name aloud. Sarah tightens her cloak, her breath a visible plume in the frozen air. She looks up at the ridgeline, snow still falling, relentless, erasing tracks even as they are made. The camera holds on her face, pale but resolute. She knows what the men suspect. She knows the granary inventory will not be about wheat or corn. She knows the clock is ticking. And still, she walks home, each step an act of defiance against the silence pressing in around her. The morning begins with silence too sharp to be natural. No dogs barking, no axes striking. Just a stillness that presses on the skin. Sarah notices it the moment she steps outside. The snow has crusted overnight, brittle underfoot, as if the valley itself holds its breath. At the granary, Carrington is already waiting. His coat collar turned high, hat shadowing his eyes. He gestures for Sarah to enter. Inside, the air is thick with dust and the faint smell of oats. Sacks tower against the walls, orderly, precise. He hands her a ledger. "Count," he says. She does, fingers brushing across burlap, lips moving silently as she tallies. But as she flips a page in the ledger, her breath stops. Between the neat columns of grain weights and dates, a folded sheet is pressed flat. Her fingers tremble as she slides it out. It is not her handwriting. The letter is written in Carrington's hand, but its content is something else entirely. By covenant, the wives will be divided, each to a different route, each with escort. Accidents may follow, but the record will show migration. Their silence will preserve the valley. Her heart lurches. The words burn. She presses the paper back into place before Carrington notices her stillness. He watches her, eyes narrow, and for a moment she wonders if he placed the note there deliberately, for her to find, or for her to be trapped by. That night, Sarah doesn't sleep. The letter's words brand themselves behind her eyelids. Divided. Escorts. Accidents. Not suspicion anymore. Not just fear. A plan. She rises quietly, skirts whispering against the floorboards, and lifts the loose plank beneath her bed. Her notebook waits. By candlelight, she copies the letter word for word, her script a shadow of Carrington's. Each stroke of ink feels like a blade carving truth into permanence. When she finishes, her hands won't stop shaking. She presses the copy to her chest, as though the act of recording has weight enough to hold her together. The next day at the well, the wives' chatter is thin, their smiles brittle. Sarah waits until the moment is right, then draws them closer with her eyes. She slips the copy into Elizabeth's hand. Elizabeth unfolds it slowly, and the color drains from her face. Rebecca bites her lip until it bleeds. Mary Lou mutters, "A covenant. They'll dress it in scripture, as if God himself ordered it." Catherine looks from one face to another, panic rising. "They mean to kill us?" Sarah steadies her voice. "Not kill. Erase. Make it seem as though we left of our own accord. That way the valley is clean." The well rope creaks, a long groan, as water sloshes below. Their circle feels suddenly exposed, as though the valley itself listens. They disperse without another word, each carrying the knowledge like a stone in her chest. Cut to the root cellar. The men gather again, their voices hushed but resolute. Carrington lays out maps, his finger tapping routes through the mountains. Joshua Wallace suggests escorting them to Nevada, where disappearance can be blamed on bandits. Samuel Brennan insists on multiple routes to avoid suspicion. They argue over logistics as if discussing cattle, not lives. "We cannot falter," Carrington intones. "If they speak, the government comes. If the government comes, the valley dies." The men nod, some with conviction, others with eyes cast low. Their faces flicker in candlelight, ordinary, tired, human. That ordinariness is what makes their decision terrifying. Meanwhile, Sarah gathers the women in a cramped cabin, shutters drawn. The candlelight wavers, casting their faces into halves, one in light, one in shadow. "We cannot wait for their escorts," she says, voice low. "If we stay, we vanish on their terms. If we leave, perhaps we vanish on our own, but at least we choose." Silence. The wives stare at each other, weighing fear against the unknown. Finally, Elizabeth speaks, her voice ragged. "If we leave, what of the children?" Sarah's throat tightens. She has no answer. Some women have little ones still tethered to them. Others, older, have seen their children grown or taken elsewhere. The decision is no longer survival alone. It is a cleaving of love. Rebecca's hand trembles as she lays it flat on the table. "Better they remember us gone than see us buried." Her words hang, terrible and final. Later that night, the wives disperse into the storm. Catherine slips a signal scarf across her window. Mary Lou overturns a bucket by the door. Rebecca places 2 knitting needles crossed on her sill. Small signs. Quiet defiance. Sarah returns to her room, where her notebook lies open. She adds one more line beneath the copied covenant. If they divide us, we must become indivisible. She presses the quill down so hard the nib splinters. The ink pools like a wound across the page. The camera pulls back slowly from the valley. Cabins hunched beneath snow, smoke rising in fragile ribbons, the ridge looming black against a storm-heavy sky. The audience knows what the women now know. This is no longer suspicion, no longer rumor. It is a death sentence wrapped in scripture and signed with ink. And for the first time, survival will require betrayal, not of their faith, but of the men who wield it. Snow falls in restless veils, covering yesterday's tracks as if the valley itself is conspiring to erase. The wives move through their chores with practiced grace, but each gesture feels like theater. The churn of butter, the folding of linens, the hauling of wood, all performed with eyes lowered, breaths measured. Sarah's mind hums with the words she copied, divided. Escorts. Accidents. Each repetition claws at her ribs. She feels it even in the simple act of pouring water, as though every vessel she lifts could tip and spill their secret. One evening, the wives gather in Rebecca's cabin. The storm presses at the windows, rattling shutters like a warning hand. The women sit close, cloaks wrapped tight, voices little more than air. They'll split us, Elizabeth whispers. One by one, scattered like wheat in a storm. Catherine's fists clench. Then we stay together, even if it kills us. Together isn't simple. Mary Lou cuts in, her tone sharp but eyes wet. Some of us have children too small to carry across mountains. You'd leave them? Or bring them to freeze? The words strike the room like a slap. Silence follows. Sarah's throat aches, but she forces the truth out. We have no good choices. Only the one where we are not erased. Rebecca leans forward, face pale in candlelight. And if we're caught running? Sarah meets her eyes. Then at least the record will not belong only to them. At Carrington's house, Margaret lingers at the doorframe as her husband sharpens his knife, slow and deliberate. You'll drive them out, she says. Not a question. He doesn't look up. We'll drive out danger. The valley must endure. She swallows hard. And what of endurance without mercy? Without truth? Carrington's hands still. He turns, face carved in shadow. Truth is what we make it. Mercy is for those who don't carry a people on their back. Margaret flinches. She has loved him too long not to hear the finality in his tone. She knows then that he has already chosen the ledger over the lives of women he once called family. The wives begin to prepare in secret. Catherine hides dried meat in her apron seams. Rebecca stitches coins into the hem of her shawl. Mary Lou memorizes landmarks from an old mining map, tracing ridgelines with her finger until the ink smudges. Sarah spends her nights hunched over the notebook, writing not just names and routes, but confessions. Each page a testimony meant to survive, even if she does not. She presses strands of hair between the leaves, tucks scraps of cloth like relics. If the valley insists on their disappearance, she will leave evidence stubborn enough to haunt. But suspicion has weight, and the men feel it. Joshua Wallace lingers too long outside Catherine's door. Samuel Brennan begins asking Margaret whether Sarah prays less than she should. Daniel Crawford inspects Rebecca's granary with questions disguised as idle chatter. The net is drawing tight. One night, Sarah finds Miriam waiting in her doorway. The older woman's face is unreadable, eyes shadowed. You stir the others, Miriam says quietly. You'll bring ruin. Sarah stiffens. Ruin's already waits. I choose not to walk into it blind. Miriam steps closer. Do you think they won't notice? That your little signals and scraps of paper go unseen? The council knows more than you think. Then why warn me? Miriam's lips tremble. Because when they come, I won't be standing with you. She leaves before Sarah can speak. The door shuts soft, final. Sarah feels a chill worse than the storm outside. Betrayal doesn't need to be shouted. It can be whispered and still cut deep. The next morning, Carrington announces new assignments. Escorts will accompany several wives to visit kin or deliver supplies beyond the valley. His voice is calm, his eyes cold. The congregation nods, murmurs approval. Only the wives feel the trap closing, hearts pounding beneath wool and cotton. Sarah looks across the hall at the women. Elizabeth clutching her shawl, Rebecca blinking back tears, Catherine biting her lip bloody. The bell tolls again. Once. Twice. Every strike sounds less like worship and more like a countdown. The valley sleeps under storm. Snow drives sideways, needles in the dark, erasing fences and footprints alike. Tonight is the night. Sarah gathers the women in the shadow of the granary. Their cloaks are pulled tight, faces raw with wind. Each carries what she can hide: food and hymns, maps and bodices, a knife, a coin. Rebecca whispers a prayer under her breath. Catherine shakes with nerves she cannot disguise. Elizabeth clutches her shawl as if it were flesh and bone. Sarah looks at them, her voice steady though her stomach knots. Once we cross the ridge, they cannot divide us. Whatever happens, we stay together. They nod. The storm swallows their breath. The women move through the sleeping town like ghosts. Boots crunch softly in the snow. Windows glow faintly where fires burn low, each one a reminder of what they are leaving. Children, hearths, the thin veneer of belonging. Every step is betrayal, yet every step is survival. They reach the tree line when a sound splits the storm. Hoofbeats. Distant, then closer. Shadows of riders sweep the ridge above them. The women freeze, pressed against bark, hearts hammering. Split, Rebecca whispers. If they catch us together, we're finished. Sarah's jaw tightens. The Covenant's words echo, divided, accidents. She knows this is the very fracture Carrington intended. No, she hisses. We stay, but the hoofbeats are upon them. Horses snort, men's shouts cut through the blizzard. Lantern light swings, carving moving circles through the dark. Panic rips them apart. Catherine bolts uphill, nimble as a deer. Rebecca and Mary Lou drag Elizabeth between them, her breath already ragged. Sarah runs last, snow lashing her face, clutching the packet of notes against her chest. The chase becomes chaos. Riders crash through drifts, hooves breaking branches. The storm makes shapes untrustworthy. Every tree is sentinel, every shadow a threat. Catherine darts into a narrow gulch, nearly swallowed by dark. A rider follows, his lantern swinging wildly, then extinguished by the wind. The scream that follows is sharp, then swallowed whole. Rebecca hears it and falters, eyes wide. Mary Lou yanks her forward, voice hoarse. Don't look back. Elizabeth stumbles, knees buckling. She collapses into the snow, gasping. Go, she pleads. I can't. Sarah kneels beside her, hands shaking. We don't leave anyone. But lanterns approach, orange light flickering against white. Rebecca pulls at Sarah's arm. If we stay, none of us leave. Tears freeze on Sarah's lashes. She presses her notebook into Rebecca's hands. Take it. If I fall, it lives. Rebecca clutches it like a child, then pulls Mary Lou forward. The two drag Elizabeth into the trees, vanishing into shadow. Sarah turns back. Riders break into the clearing. Hooves spray snow, men shouting over the wind. She runs, heart pounding, cloak streaming behind her. The storm swallows sound and space. Sarah stumbles into a collapsed miner's hut, wood splintered and half-buried. She presses herself against the wall, breath clouding the dark. The hoofbeats circle, closer, then away. A rider dismounts. Footsteps crunch slowly toward the hut. Through the gaps in the boards, she sees his face. Joshua Wallace, lantern in hand. His eyes are wild, beard crusted with ice. Sarah, he calls softly, almost tender. Don't make this harder. Her chest heaves. She clutches a shard of broken wood like a weapon. Wallace pauses at the doorway. You think this is cruelty? It's mercy. Better erased than what the soldiers will do if they come. His words hang in the storm. For an instant, Sarah sees him not as a monster, but as a man convinced he is righteous. That makes it worse. She lunges, driving the wood at him. The lantern crashes to the ground, oil spilling fire across the snow. Wallace roars, staggering back. Flames lick upward, orange against the white storm. Sarah bolts into the night. At dawn, the storm breaks. The valley lies under a silence thick as burial. In a hollow near the ridge, searchers later find Elizabeth's shawl, torn and stiff with frost. Farther on, Catherine's scarf, tangled in branches. Rebecca and Mary Lou are gone, their tracks swallowed by snow. And Sarah, nothing. Only a charred patch near a miner's hut, blackened boards half buried. The camera pulls wide. The ridge stretching endless, sky pale as bone. A single page flutters loose on the wind. Sarah's handwriting, ink blurred but legible. If they divide us, we must remain whole in memory. The page lifts, carried higher, until it vanishes into white. Cut to black. Spring comes late to Cedar Valley. Snow shrinks into ditches, rivers loosen, fields breathe again. But the thaw cannot touch the silence left behind. The congregation still gathers on Sundays, though benches stand emptier. Children ask about mothers who went to Nevada or visited kin, but the answers are rehearsed, brittle as glass. Men nod solemnly, repeating the script until it tastes like truth. Margaret Carrington sits at the edge of the hall, hands folded, eyes fixed not on her husband but on the dust dancing in the light. She has not spoken since the night Sarah vanished, but silence itself has become her testimony. Carrington grows thinner. His sermons swell with words of purity, sacrifice, endurance, but his voice cracks where it once rang firm. He dreams often, waking drenched, calling names he refuses to utter in daylight. The valley applauds his leadership, yet whispers spread that the elder avoids the ridge, that he cannot look at snow without trembling. One evening, Margaret finds him at his desk, head bowed over a stack of papers. He doesn't hear her enter. His hand moves slowly, writing the same phrase again and again. We preserve the valley. The ink smudges, letters blurring as though even the paper resists. She watches, then turns away. No words will bridge the distance between ledger and grave. Years pass. The valley changes shape. Fields sold. Families scatter. The town shrinks like cloth in rain. In 1927, children exploring the ruins of a prospector's cabin find a charred notebook half buried under ash. Pages brittle, but still readable. Names. Routes. A covenant copied in a precise hand. Later, in 1946, a box appears in the rafters of the meeting hall, locks of hair tied with ribbon, a child's curl wrapped in cloth, a necklace of tarnished silver. The men who open it close it again quickly, muttering that such relics belong to grief, not record. But the women of the valley whisper each detail until the box itself becomes legend. By the 1960s, the valley is nearly empty. Irrigation ditches lie dry, granaries collapse under their own weight. Yet stories refuse to vanish. A granddaughter reading in Salt Lake finds a line copied from Sarah's journal in a family Bible margin. If they divide us, we must remain whole in memory. She circles the words in red ink, refusing to let them fade. The film closes not with faces, but with places. The ridge where hoofbeats once thundered, now silent, snow melting into spring grass. The hollow where Elizabeth fell, filled with wildflowers that sway as if listening. The miner's hut, only charred beams, moss-reclaiming wood. And finally, the well in the center of Cedar Valley. The camera lowers, following the rope down, until water gleams in the dark. The surface ripples though nothing touches it. Reflected in that trembling mirror is a fragment of sky, and faintly, the suggestion of 7 women's faces, blurred, fleeting, unbroken. The screen fades as their reflection dissolves, leaving only water and silence.